poor girl covered in mud entered the interview. The Billionaire Tycoon hired her instantly. Before starting this story, I'd like to take a moment to ask for your help. If you enjoy the stories we share, please help the channel reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers. I'd be very happy if you could subscribe. Without further delay, let's dive into this emotional story. The October rain hammered against the cracked windows of Maya Chen's studio apartment in Queens, New York. She pressed her face against the glass, watching the water cascade down in sheets that turned the streets into rivers. Her interview at Blackstone Industries was in 2 hours, and she could already see the subway entrance flooded 3 blocks away. Maya had been preparing for this moment for months. After losing her job at a small marketing firm when the company downsized, she'd survived on ramen noodles and hope, sending out hundreds of applications. The call from Blackstone's HR department had felt like a miracle. A junior analyst position at one of Manhattan's most prestigious investment firms, working directly under CEO Alexander Blackstone himself. She smoothed her only professional outfit, a navy blazer and skirt she'd bought at a thrift store, and tailored herself. The fabric was slightly worn at the elbows, but it was clean and pressed. Her portfolio sat ready on the small table, printed on paper she could barely afford, but containing work that showcased 3 years of business school and an analytical mind that had impressed every professor she'd ever had. The news droned. In the background, flash flood warnings remain in effect for all 5 boroughs. The MTA has suspended service on multiple lines due to water damage. Commuters are advised to seek alternate transportation. Maya's heart sank. She had exactly $47 to her name. Not enough for a taxi to Manhattan, especially with surge pricing during the storm. She grabbed her phone and called every rideshare app, watching the prices climb impossibly high. Walking wasn't an option. It would take 3 hours through flooded streets. Desperation clawed at her chest. This interview wasn't just an opportunity, it was her last lifeline before eviction. Her landlord had already posted the first notice, and her credit cards were maxed out from months of unemployment. She thought of her parents back in California, who had sacrificed everything to send her to Columbia Business School, working double shifts at their restaurant while she pursued her dreams. Maya made a decision that would change everything. She stripped off her professional clothes, pulled on jeans, rain boots, and her warmest jacket. She wrapped her portfolio in 3 plastic bags and tucked her interview outfit into a waterproof backpack. If the subways weren't running, she'd find another way. The October air bit through her jacket as she stepped outside. The flooded streets reflected the gray sky, and debris floated past like urban driftwood. Maya began walking toward the Queensboro Bridge, each step a commitment to her future. Cars crawled through the intersection, their hazard lights blinking like Morse code distress signals. By the time she reached the bridge approach, her boots were soaked through. The wind whipped rain into her face, and her hair hung in wet strands around her shoulders. Other pedestrians huddled under awnings and in doorways, waiting for the storm to pass. But Maya kept walking, driven by something deeper than comfort or pride. The city skyline emerged through the rain as she climbed the bridge's pedestrian walkway. Manhattan's towers stood like giants in the mist, and somewhere among them waited her future, if she could get there in time. The Queensboro Bridge stretched ahead of Maya like a test of will. Wind howled between the steel cables, driving rain sideways with such force that she had to lean into it to keep moving forward. Each step was a battle against the elements, but also against the voice in her head, whispering that this was insane, that no job was worth this punishment. Halfway across the bridge, Maya encountered a family stranded by their stalled car. A woman, in her 30s, stood beside a Honda Civic, its hazard lights blinking weakly, while 2 small children peered out from the back seat. The woman was on her phone, clearly distressed. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Maya shouted over the wind. "My car died, and my kids are scared," the woman replied. "I'm trying to call for help, but the tow trucks are all backed up for hours." Without hesitation, Maya approached the vehicle. She'd learned basic car maintenance working summers at her uncle's garage during high school. Can I take a look? The woman looked skeptical. Maya was soaked, her hair plastered to her head, hardly looking like automotive help. But desperation made people take chances. Maya popped the hood and immediately saw the problem. Your air filter is completely waterlogged, and water got into your distributor cap. Do you have any towels or napkins? 20 minutes later, after drying the distributor cap and clearing the air filter, Maya had the Honda purring again. The woman tried to press money into her hands, but Maya refused, already running late. At least let me drive you somewhere. The woman called as Maya continued toward Manhattan. I'm good, thank you. Maya waved, breaking into a jog despite her waterlogged boots. By the time she reached Manhattan's streets, Maya looked like she'd survived a shipwreck. Her jeans were soaked through, mud splashed up to her knees from navigating flooded sidewalks. The rain had finally begun to lighten, but the damage was done. She found a McDonald's bathroom and changed into her interview clothes, but there was no hiding what the journey had cost her. The Blackstone Industries building towered 47 stories above Midtown, its glass facade reflecting the storm clouds. Maya stood in the lobby, acutely aware of her appearance. Her blazer was wrinkled from the backpack, her hair still damp despite her attempts to fix it. And worst of all, mud streaked her skirt and legs where the floodwater had splashed up during her trek through the streets. Other candidates waited in the reception area, perfectly groomed men and women in expensive suits, their leather briefcases gleaming. They glanced at Maya with barely concealed disdain, and she felt her confidence crumble. The receptionist, a polished blonde woman, looked Maya up and down with obvious disapproval. Name? Maya Chen. I have a 2 p.m. appointment with Mr. Blackstone. Right. The woman's tone was frosty. Take a seat. Someone will be with you. Maya perched on the edge of a leather chair, trying to make herself as small as possible. Her portfolio felt inadequate in her mud-stained hands. Around her, conversations continued in low, confident murmurs about market trends and investment strategies. She closed her eyes and tried to center herself, remembering why she was here and what she had to offer beyond appearances. Before continuing with the story, I'd like to take a moment to ask for your help. If you're enjoying this story, please help the channel reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers. I'd truly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Now back to the story. Alexander Blackstone had built his empire on reading people. At 42, he'd turned a modest inheritance into a multi-billion-dollar investment firm by trusting his instincts about human nature more than market projections. He'd seen thousands of candidates over the years, polished MBA graduates, who could recite textbook strategies, but couldn't think outside predetermined boxes. When his assistant knocked on his office door that Tuesday afternoon, he was reviewing quarterly reports, the storm outside making the afternoon feel later than it was. Mr. Blackstone, your 2 p.m. interview is here, but… Patricia hesitated, which was unusual for his typically unflappable assistant. But what? She looks like she's been through the flood. Literally. The other candidates are making comments. Alexander frowned. He'd specifically requested that all interviews proceed despite the weather. If someone had made it here through this storm, that said something about their character. Send her in. When Maya Chen walked through his office, daughter, Alexander's first instinct was to offer her a towel. She was clearly soaked, mud streaking her professional attire, her hair still damp around her shoulders. But what struck him most were her eyes. Dark, determined, and utterly unashamed despite her bedraggled appearance. Ms. Chen, I presume. He stood, extending his hand. Yes, sir. Thank you for seeing me. Her handshake was firm, confident despite everything. Please, sit down. Can I get you anything? Coffee, water, a towel? Maya managed a small smile. Coffee would be wonderful, thank you. And I apologize for my appearance. The subway was flooded, so I walked from Queens. You walked from Queens? In this storm? Yes, sir. This interview was too important to miss. Alexander poured coffee from the machine in his office, studying her carefully. Most people would have led with excuses, apologies, requests to reschedule. This young woman simply stated facts and moved forward. Tell me about yourself, Maya. For the next 20 minutes, Maya transformed. Her appearance became irrelevant as she discussed market analysis with a sophistication that impressed Alexander. She'd clearly done her homework on Blackstone Industries. But more importantly, she offered insights that showed original thinking. "What's your take on the emerging market's decline?" Alexander asked, testing her. "Everyone's focusing on the immediate volatility, but I think we're missing the infrastructure opportunity," Maya replied without hesitation. "When markets crash, that's when smart money invests in the foundation for the next boom. Roads, telecommunications, energy grids, that's where the real value will be in 5 years." Alexander leaned back in his chair. This wasn't textbook regurgitation. This was genuine strategic thinking. Why should I hire someone who shows up to an interview covered in mud? The question hung in the air. Maya met his gaze steadily. "Because I'm the kind of person who shows up no matter what. You can teach someone to dress professionally, but you can't teach someone to have the determination to walk 15 miles through a flood to get here. And frankly, sir, if you judge my capabilities based on mud on my skirt rather than what's in my head, then maybe this isn't the kind of place I want to work anyway." The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then Alexander Blackstone did something that surprised them both. He laughed. A genuine, delighted laugh that he hadn't felt in months of identical interviews with identical candidates. "You're hired." Maya blinked. "I'm sorry. You start Monday. Patricia will handle the paperwork and your signing bonus." "And Maya?" He stood, extending his hand again. "Next time, take a taxi. The company will reimburse you." Maya's first month at Blackstone Industries was a masterclass in office politics and professional pressure. The news of her unconventional hiring had spread through the firm like wildfire, earning her the nickname Mud Girl among some of the junior associates. She arrived each morning at 6:30, an hour before anyone else, using the quiet time to prepare for whatever challenges the day might bring. Her direct supervisor, James Hartford, was a Princeton graduate with family connections and a barely concealed resentment that Alexander Blackstone had personally hired someone he considered beneath the firm's standards. He assigned Maya the grunt work, endless data entry, filing, and research tasks that seemed designed to break her spirit rather than utilize her analytical skills. "Chen, I need these client reports reformatted by noon," James would say, dropping a stack of papers on her desk. "And make sure there are no errors. Mr. Blackstone expects perfection." Maya absorbed it all without complaint, but she wasn't passive. During her lunch breaks, she studied the firm's portfolio, analyzing investment patterns and market positions. She noticed discrepancies that others had missed, inefficiencies that cost the company thousands in potential profits. Her cubicle was tucked in the corner of the 42nd floor, far from the executive offices. But Maya had a clear view of the city where she'd walked through that flood 5 weeks ago. On particularly difficult days, she'd look out at those streets and remember what she'd endured to get here. The breakthrough came during a staff meeting in November. The firm was considering a major investment in renewable energy infrastructure, and the senior analysts were divided. Some argued for solar, others for wind, while a few pushed for traditional energy stocks as safer bets. Maya sat in the back, taking notes, not expected to contribute. But as the debate continued in circles, she recognized the same short-sighted thinking she'd encountered in business school. Smart people making decisions based on incomplete data. When Alexander asked if anyone had additional insights, the room fell silent. Maya's hand slowly rose. "Ms. Chen?" Alexander's voice carried across the conference room. Maya stood, her heart hammering. 20 pairs of eyes focused on her, most skeptical, some openly hostile. "I've been analyzing the infrastructure data and I think we're approaching this incorrectly," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Everyone's debating which energy source to invest in, but the real opportunity is in grid modernization. Solar and wind are intermittent, which means you need smart grid technology to make them viable at scale." She walked to the whiteboard, sketching out her analysis. "If we invest in the companies developing grid storage and distribution technology, we position ourselves to profit regardless of which energy source wins. Plus, These companies are undervalued because they're not as flashy as solar panels or wind turbines. The room was quiet. Maya could hear her own breathing as she waited for someone to respond. "Interesting perspective," said Margaret Winters, the head of research. "Do you have numbers to support this?" "Yes, ma'am." Maya had spent 2 weeks compiling the data on her own time. She distributed copies of her analysis, watching as faces around the room shifted from skepticism to interest. Alexander Blackstone studied the report, occasionally glancing up at Maya. "This is thorough work. How long did this take you?" "I've been working on it during lunch breaks and evenings for about 2 weeks." "2 weeks?" James Hartford interjected. "When were you supposed to be doing your assigned work?" "All my assigned work has been completed on time and error-free," Maya replied. Calmly. "I checked." Alexander smiled slightly. "Indeed it has. James, I want you to work with Maya to develop this proposal further. I think we might have something here." As the meeting ended, Maya felt the shift in the room's energy. Some colleagues nodded approvingly, others looked at her with new respect, but she also noticed the tightening around James's eyes, the way he gripped his pen a little too hard. The real test was just beginning. 6 months after walking through the flood, Maya Chen stood in Alexander Blackstone's office as an equal. The grid modernization portfolio she'd proposed had generated a 43% return, making it one of the firm's most successful investments of the year. Her promotion to senior analyst had come with a corner office, a substantial salary increase, and the respect of colleagues who once called her Mud Girl. But success hadn't changed the essential parts of who Maya was. She still arrived early, still worked harder than necessary, and still remembered the desperation that had driven her across the Queensboro Bridge in a storm. "Maya, I want to talk to you about something," Alexander said, gesturing for her to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Outside, the March afternoon sun streamed through the windows, a stark contrast to that dark October day. "Of course, sir. I'm restructuring the firm, creating a new division focused on socially responsible investing, environmental projects, infrastructure development, companies that make a real difference. I want you to head it up." Maya felt her breath catch. "Mr. Blackstone, that's incredible, but I have to ask, why me? There are senior partners with decades more experience." Alexander leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Do you remember what you said in your interview? About judging capabilities based on what's in someone's head rather than mud on their skirt?" "Yes, sir. That day you showed me something I'd forgotten in 20 years of business. Raw determination, the willingness to do whatever it takes, not just for personal gain, but because you believe in something bigger than yourself. That's exactly what this division needs." Maya thought about the journey that had brought her here. Not just the physical walk through the flood, but the months of proving herself, the late nights and early mornings, the small victories that had built into something substantial. "There's one condition," she said. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating with me?" "I want to implement a scholarship program, full rides for business students from low-income backgrounds with guaranteed internships here. The interview process should focus on potential and determination, not just pedigree." "Interesting. Why?" Maya smiled, thinking of her parents' restaurant, of the choice between groceries and textbooks, of all the talented people who never got the chance to walk through their own flood toward opportunity. Because the next great analyst might be someone who can't afford a taxi to the interview. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, then broke into the same delighted laugh Maya remembered from her first day. "Done. When can you start?" 3 weeks later, Maya hosted the first information session for the Blackstone Opportunity Scholarship. The conference room was packed with students from community colleges and state schools, young people who wore determination in their eyes and uncertainty in their posture. "I want to tell you about the day I walked 15 miles through a flood to get to an interview," Maya began, and saw recognition spark in faces around the room. These were her people, the ones who understood that sometimes the most important journey was the one you took when everything was against you. As she spoke, Maya caught sight of her reflection in the conference room window. Professional, confident, successful, but still fundamentally the same person who had refused to let a storm stop her from chasing her dreams. Outside, the New York City skyline stretched toward the horizon, full of possibilities for anyone brave enough to walk toward them, no matter what storms they might face along the way. The girl covered in mud had become a woman who could change lives, and she was just getting started.